Okay, we are ready for chapter 33. We left off, and Palmer had screamed no, he didn't want the treatment. He had actually told the guys that he did not want to be a ringer, which is kind of surprising, I think, to some who thought he wouldn't tell the guys. He would just pretend the whole time. Some people thought that he would tell them. And he took off running, and the guys were chasing him. I wonder what's going to happen. I wonder how they will react, if they'll catch him. And they know where he lives, so that's another thought. It's kind of different now. How do you think he feels that he's actually told them? I think we're going to find out in the next couple chapters. Chapter 33. A bug crawled down the middle of his back. He tried to reach it. He whipped off his shirt, ran a fingertip up his spine. It wasn't a bug. It was sweat. The sun boiled in the cloudless sky. The dumpster had been slowly reeling in its shadow, so that he now had to sit with his back flat against it and his knees drawn up in order to remain wholly in the shade. The dumpster's metal flank felt cool and crusty against his bare back. His breath and heartbeat had long since returned to normal. The noontime music of church bells had passed an hour ago, maybe two. He was hungry, thirsty, but also safe. The only other safe place being his own house, which was exactly 5.5 blocks from this dumpster behind the great grocer supermarket. The back door slammed open. Out came a worker dragging 2 hugely swollen black plastic bags. Seeing Palmer, he said, "You waiting to help me?" Was the man joking? He wasn't smiling. "No," answered Palmer. He wagged his head. "Made in the shade." He went back inside. 5.5 blocks. In his head, Palmer plotted a course that, except for the final half block, kept him in alleyways. Even so, streets would have to be crossed in broad daylight. And anyway, the guys themselves took alleys as often as streets. They could be anywhere, around any corner, behind any parked car. They could be in front of the great grocer right now, asking people, "Did you see a kid?" They might already be spreading word around town. "Palmer LaRue has a pigeon." He knew that if the fact had ever been in question, the question had been answered spectacularly by his actions this morning. The back door slammed open. The worker came out, but this time there was nothing in his hands but a can of Sprite. He stopped in front of Palmer and held the can down to him. It hadn't been opened. "You look like you need this, kid." It occurred to Palmer that this might be some kind of trick, but he was too thirsty to care. He took the can. It felt blessedly cold. He stared up at the man. He felt like crying. The man's lips almost smiled. "On the house," he said, and he was gone. Palmer snapped open the Sprite and drank the can empty, taking time out only to gasp for breath. He lay his head back against the dumpster and closed his eyes. In spite of himself, in spite of everything, for a few precious seconds, he felt good. His first idea had been to wait until dark, then make a run for home. As the sun dropped below the roofline of the great grocer, he began to see that was a bad idea. Nipper would be coming home soon, and who could say that they were not waiting for him? Maybe even on the porch roof itself with stones, slingshots. Suddenly it was clear he had to get home before Nipper. Now, he dropped the can and ran. Alley and street, he took the fastest way, driven by images of Nipper flying into a blizzard of stones. As he approached the turn onto his block, it occurred to him that they might be waiting at his front door. It occurred to him that this might be the last minute on earth. He slowed down and thought of Nipper and ran on. They were not there. He burst into his house. He wanted to collapse right then and there, to rub his face in the living room rug, but he dared not stop. He took the stairs 3 at a time, flung open the door. Nipper was at the window, on the sill outside the screen, and inside, sitting on his pillow, was the yellow cat, Panther, facing the window, its head as still as a statue, its tail sweeping slowly from side to side. It hadn't even bothered to look at Palmer. The closest thing was a comic book. Palmer hurled it. The cat hissed, screeched, leaped to the floor, and was downstairs before Palmer finished his scream. It was then, as he opened the screen to let Nipper in, that he knew his pigeon must go. What do you think he's going to do with the pigeon? He's tried to shoo Nipper away, and Nipper won't stay away. How do you think he's going to get rid of it? Answer that question before we go to the next chapter. And we're going to find out what's going to happen. Chapter 34. Dorothy was crying. Why tomorrow? Because they know, he said for the third time. He pounded the bed. They know, they know, they know. And they're not going to wait. Plus, Pigeon Day is coming up. It's only going to get worse. Henry wouldn't hurt Nipper. Henry doesn't count. It's the others, she implored. But why? Why can't you just hide him in the house or in my house? They'll find out, he spoke wearily, pacing. They were right in this room last night. The cat was here today. They know everything. They won't give up. What we really ought to do is take him out tonight, under the cover of darkness, she blurted. No! So, he shrugged, tomorrow. She slumped facing the wall, her forehead leaning into it. Why don't they just let him alone? She looked at him as if the answers were to reveal. What did he ever do to them? He looked up at the closet shelf where Nipper was roosting. He was born a pigeon, that's what. But how can you do it? She whined. The months of spring and summer had filed his nerves to a point. He was nearly galloping back and forth across his room. Though he muffled the volume of his voice, lest his parents hear, his entire body screamed, How can I do it? How can I do it? Can't you get it through your head? They're going to kill him. Do you want him dead? Earlier in the day, Dorothy had seen the unflattenable Nerf ball in the street and had retrieved it. She stroked it now in her lap. Her voice was barely audible. I just don't want him gone. He went to the window. A quarter moon was out. He began to weep. Do you think I do? The next morning they met at 6 o'clock with bikes. Dorothy's bike had a wicker basket fixed to the handlebars. That's where the shoebox went. Palmer had dumped the toy soldiers onto the bed, poked air holes in the lid, and deposited the pigeon. They had told their parents that they were going on an early morning breakfast picnic to the park. In the basket also lay a box of donuts and many cartons of iced tea. They rode to the park and out of the park and out of town. They rode past the barbecue restaurant and the burnt-out barn and the golf course, whose dew-topped greens looked like silver ponds. They stopped only to switch bikes when Dorothy could no longer bear to transport the basket. They pedaled down roads they had seen only from a car before, and then down roads they had never seen at all. The only sounds were the whir of spokes, the crunch of tires. Up and down hills they rode and rode until it seemed they must be in another state, if not another country. Palmer, leading the way, pulled off the road by a field where horses were grazing. Let's eat, he said. Dorothy took the donuts and drinks from the bike basket. Is this where we let him go? No, not far enough. Not far enough? He punched a straw into an iced tea carton and took a long sip. He shook his head. Pigeons can find their way back from a long way off. Dorothy broke out a piece of donut and stuck it under the lid of the shoebox. It was immediately snatched from her fingers by Nipper. I can't even find my way back from here. You're not a pigeon. He bit into a donut. Even far's not enough. It has to be confusing, too. She was alarmed. What do you mean? You're not going to blindfold him? He sneered. No, but something else. You'll see. He had taken only one bite of the donut. He slipped the rest into the shoebox. Let's go. Another endless stretch of riding brought them to an unfenced meadow. Palmer said, Here, and veered into it. Wait, he called back. Dorothy stopped at the roadside and watched Palmer drive her bicycle deeper into the meadow. The wheels jumped. The basket bounced over the clotted earth. Thistletops erupted. Wildflowers bobbled as the bike charged in reckless patterns only a fly could follow. Circles, figure eights, zigzags, crazy doodles. This went on for many minutes when suddenly the bike bolted on a beeline into the woods beyond. Dorothy waited as long as she could before becoming impatient, then worried. She could not see an inch into the dense tree line. The sun was directly overhead, making a shadowless desert of the meadow. The handlebars of the bicycle were hot. Then there he was, popping from the woods, pedaling furiously straight at her, the donut box flying in the basket. As he came closer, she saw that his face was red and wet, his mouth twisted. The shoebox was empty. He did not stop and look at her, but charged with a clatter onto the road. It was a long time before he slowed down, allowing her to catch up. They switched back to their own bikes. They rode in silence. They asked directions at a gas station. They bought sodas and threw away the donuts. When they coasted the final hill into town, the streets were in shadow. Wearily, they climbed the stairs to Palmer's room. Nipper was waiting at the window. How do you think they feel? They drove all that way on their bikes, rode all that way, circled, zigzagged, and Nipper beat him back to the window. Pretty cool. So what's he going to do now? He can't get Nipper away. Chapter 35. He thought of not feeding Nipper, of not letting him in. Sooner or later, the pigeon would get the hint and fly away forever. He told Dorothy of his idea, hoping she would forbid it. She did. She yelped so loud he had to clamp his hand over her mouth. Okay, he said. He began pacing. But we have to do something. We have to get rid of him. Get him out of here. Dorothy did not argue. They're not going to give up. No way. Not till they get him. Pacing. They're going to keep sneaking the cat in. They're going to spy on the house day and night. Day and night. They'll wait and wait. Slingshots, BB guns, maybe even poison. Pacing, arms outthrust. They'll put poisoned cereal on the roof. Dorothy was laughing. Palmer stopped and scowled. What? She was on her back on the bed on the toy soldiers, howling at the ceiling. She dragged herself up and found her voice. Do what you were doing. What? Walk. He took a step. No, walk. She swept her hand back and forth like you were. He resumed pacing. Suddenly, conscious of his feet, he looked down and saw what she was laughing at. Nipper was pacing, turning when he turned, tracing his every move back and forth across his room. He halted. The pigeon halted. He didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The next day, his mother confessed. It happened after breakfast. He was in his room. He heard his mother's footsteps coming up the stairs. Normally, the footsteps would turn and head for the bathroom or her own bedroom. This time, they came straight to his door. She knocked. Palmer, can I come in? Quickly, he glanced about the room. He noted 2 white powdery droppings that he had neglected to clean up and a cereal box on the floor. He had been getting lax lately. At least the bird itself had left for the day. He kicked the cereal box under the bed and composed his face. Come in. She came in, smiling. Hi, she said. She waved as if she hadn't seen him in the kitchen just 2 minutes ago. Hi, he said. He did not wave. He was standing on one of the powdery poopies. The other was on his desk, which was exactly where she sat, her left hand, palm down, no more than an inch from the white deposit. He expected her to look around to inspect the place that she'd been asked to stay away from for months now. But she kept looking only at him, smiling, and he now saw that it was not quite her regular smile. There was a goofy quality to it. It was changing, breaking down. I have a confession to make, she said. Her face was sad now, droopy, but it wasn't real. It was pretend, clownish. He said nothing. The smile was back, real and regular. We know you have a pigeon. He could not move or speak. She laughed. Palmer, breathe. He breathed. She held out her arms. Come here. He went to her and was swallowed entirely in her embrace. All strength drained out of him, and all of a sudden he understood how alone he had been and how much he had missed his parents' support. He sobbed. She held him tighter, swaying. From beyond her heartbeat, he heard her voice. "Didn't you notice things weren't always the way you left them? Didn't you notice that it never got dusty in here? Did you really think you could keep your mother out of your room in her own house?" Actually, yes, he had thought so. She held him at arm's length. He had never seen such a smile. Her eyes were gleaming radiant. "Didn't you notice that a new box of Honey Crunchers magically appeared in your closet whenever the old box was almost empty?" He stared at her, blinking. Yes, he had noticed, and that's exactly what he thought. Magic. She laughed aloud, hugged him again, and released him. "Do you think you could have a pet pigeon in the house since, what, January, and Daddy and I wouldn't know about it?" "I thought you'd be mad," he said. She fluttered her fingers at the door. "Go get me a tissue." He fetched a tissue from her room. She used it to wipe the dropping from the desk. "And don't forget the one you're standing on," she said, tossing the tissue into the basket. She stared at him. "Mad? Why would we be mad at you?" He stated the obvious. "It's a pigeon." She nodded. Her voice became even softer. "I understand. We understand. And we were a little concerned, but not mad. Never mad. But," he didn't know how to put it, "Dad." She smiled. "Don't worry. Your dad's been changing. He didn't even go to watch Pigeon Day last year, much less shoot." She put a hand on his shoulder. "One night, don't tell him I told you this. One night, he snuck into your room while you were sleeping and stood there with a flashlight at your closet, looking at your pigeon." She chuckled. "Take my word for it, that bird is as safe with your dad as it is with you." They talked through much of the morning. Palmer told her everything. Nipper's arrival after the snowstorm, the daily wake-up ear peck, the guys and their growing suspicions, tree-stumping Dorothy, spitting on the classroom floor. He wished he had a camera to preserve the look on her face. Refusing the treatment. When he told her of his lifelong fear that he dreaded the day he would become 10 and a ringer, his lip quivered, and she made a sound of pain and squeezed him tight and patted his head and his back. After a while, she said, "Don't let Nipper go. Keep him." He tried to explain. He tried to make her understand what life was like for him, that there simply was not enough room in town, not this town, for himself, the guys, and a pigeon. His fear was too great, he told her, and his course had been set. So, when a day later Dorothy told him that her family was heading to the seashore for a vacation, Palmer asked her to take Nipper along and release him there. She protested, but in the end, she spoke to her parents, and her parents, as Palmer had hoped they would, agreed to take care of things. Dorothy came for Nipper the night before. She refused to use the shoebox. She carried the sleeping bird across the street in her hands. The next day, Palmer stayed in bed until noon. So Dorothy's going to the beach for vacation. She's going to take Nipper. And Palmer's parents knew about Nipper the whole time. Why do you think they didn't say anything before? And what do you think is going to happen? Any ideas? Let me know, and we will hear some more chapters tomorrow. Have a good day.